is South Korea's judiciary become excessively politicized from your point of view?
That's actually a really great question. That's a possible outcome from this.
Professor Robertkelli, now my question is on the economy side. So how much impact will the reciprocal tariffs imposed by the Trump administration have on the South Korean economy? That's just one example of the economic impact from the outside to the South Korea to this country. And maybe there are other pressures from inside and from outside also. So what's your point? Is the country ready to embrace these new uncertainties?
Yeah, so the impeachment wasn't very good, as you might imagine, as your viewers almost certainly know. The impeachment wasn't very good for the exchange rate as a general marker of Korean political and economic stability. The exchange rate has reflected the political turbulence of the last 3 or 4 months. And on top of that, now you have these tariffs. The tariff against Korea is pretty stiff. 26% is awfully high. And in fact, the acting president yesterday convened a sort of national security session about this. It's seen as sort of this major sort of national crisis. I'm not actually sure if that's the case. I think there are things the Koreans can probably do. Donald Trump is famously open to dealing and likes to be solicited and things like that. I would imagine the Korean government will probably work out some major carve-outs. I would also point out, by the way, that the United States and South Korea have a trade deal, the Korea-U.S. FTA KORUS. And so legally, by the KORUS standard, what Donald Trump did is actually illegal. He's not actually supposed to do that, right? I don't know if the president cares about that, but I mean, it does actually violate black letter law between Korea and the United States.
So, Professor Robert, and we know now South Korea is kind of in the political vacuum periods, and especially when facing the pressure from the U.S. But for the President Yoon Suk-yeol, he is kind of a pro-U.S. policy and to strengthen the alliance with the U.S. So now after this impeachment, how would South Korea balance its relations with the U.S.?
Yeah, this is going to be pretty tricky. Traditionally, the United States gets along better with conservative presidents in South Korea, right? American officials don't ever actually say this publicly, but South Korean conservatives tend to have sort of similar foreign policy beliefs to the American foreign policy community on things like China, North Korea, and Japan. South Korean progressives are a little bit more of a mixed bag. They're much more dovish about North Korea than, they're much more dovish about North Korea than the United States is. For example, the South Korean left is much more interested in reaching out to China, for example, than the South Korean conservatives are. And so I would imagine that a South Korean progressive will win the election in June, and then there will be a significant shift in South Korean foreign policy. In the interest of your viewers in China, I would imagine that South Korea is much more interested in a deal with China after the election.
And with the court deciding not this only one president, but 3 presidential fates, like the previous 2 plus this one, is South Korea's judiciary become excessively politicized from your point of view?
That's actually a really great question. That's a possible outcome from this. I don't think so. I would actually argue, although I'm not a lawyer, I'm a political scientist, but I would actually argue that South Korea's judiciary has performed quite admirably in these circumstances, right? I mean, the country's highly polarized. There's nothing the judges can do about it, right? And they are forced to deal with these really, really difficult issues and rule as best they can on the merits, right? Their job is not to reflect public opinion. Their job is not to channel polarization, but to help make decisions based on what actually happened. And they spent 11 weeks now. I believe they spent 11 weeks working in this, going through this enormous record, and they came to a conclusion that was 8-0. That's as definitive as you get, right? This wasn't a split vote. It's very clear that the judges, having seen 3-4 months of evidence, believe that Yoon Suk-yeol was guilty. That does not strike me as politicization, but I certainly imagine that South Korean conservatives, particularly the pro-Yoon protesters on the street, they're probably on the street right now. That's why my alerts are ringing on my phone, right? They will argue that. Right? I mean, there's going to be a chunk of South Korean conservatives, maybe 25% of the country, who will say that, yes, the courts are politicized. They've ruled against South Korean conservative presidents twice.